Spider-Man comics today absolutely break me to my core, physically and mentally. It's just in my eyes, I don't see at all anymore where Peter's story is even going at this point whatsoever. MJ now has two kids and dates some guy named fucking Mark, I think.
I wonder now that if I had told myself then everything that I know now, would he have been surprised, or would he have seen it coming? Okay, so suppose I show you this chicken sandwich right here. This dry-ass, flavorless, spiceless, hopeless chicken sandwich that looks like it would do more harm to you eating than going starved. This is the run in its entirety. From the first bite equal to a few issues of Amazing Spider-Man, your throat's already quaking for something. Anything to help it go down. But there's nothing. You're feeling all the wasted potential sear your throat as it flows down. But I have 3 solutions to help you through the pain if you don't like the absolute shitsicle that is current Amazing Spider-Man comics. That will make you almost, if not completely, forget about it. Starting with number 1.
Travis, it's kill or be killed.
Now, I don't like to make comparisons and say one thing is better than the other, especially when it's something leagues different from the other. But when this is the subject matter, I'll make the comparison just this once. Now, it isn't for everyone, but if you want a modernized tale of a teenage Peter in high school, hanging out with friends, struggling with several relationships on top of trying to juggle an ordinary life with a bit of stuff that might not stick the landing anymore because of the time it was made and being the wall-crawling, web-slinging Ultimate Spider-Man with a gut-wrenching conclusion, then that's a spectacular start. Especially considering that it's only roughly 200 issues and takes you through a wild journey of what it means to have great power and the many responsibilities it comes with. Considering that by the end of Peter's journey, he gives everything he has to save the ones most precious to him, dying in the process. It's a cold and bleak ending to a character like Peter, and I feel nothing but pure rage every time I see Norman's shit-eating grin hearing that he succeeded in killing Spider-Man. And it only gets worse when you read The Funeral of Spider-Man. You see through the eyes of everyone Peter loved, how they process their grief, how they crumble through the sheer despair of his loss. And it breaks me to my core every time Aunt May talks with that little girl who asks if she was his mom, and thanking Aunt May for raising the man that saved her from dying in a fire. It's these moments that carry such rich emotion, and in the end, that's really what this series is remembered for. I'm sure everyone watching this video has lost a loved one at some point or another. When you're faced with it head on, you'll ask, what was it all for? Was there something I could have done? Why did it have to be this way? Now I wish I had an answer. I wish I could say that it's all part of some master plan with absolute certainty. But when you get down to the bottom of it all, it's inexplicable. But just because that person has passed and you'll never see them again, it doesn't mean their memory has to stay dead either. Insert Miles Morales. After being bit by the spider, Miles sort of awkwardly stumbles into his powers. He doesn't just jump right into the superhero bit, but the powers are there. He sees that New York already has a Spider-Man, so surely he can just live his life, right? He's a kid. He doesn't want to die fighting some stupid bad guys. He just wants a normal life like every other kid. Wrong. Peter fucking dies. Miles was at the scene and couldn't do anything to stop it because he just got his powers and didn't try to learn how to properly use them to begin with.
It's okay. I did it. Don't you see? It's okay. I did it. I couldn't save him. Uncle Ben, I couldn't save him. No matter what I did. But I saved you. I did it. I did.
So Miles feels like Peter's death is all his fault. It takes Miles rudely asking Gwen why Peter went out as Spider-Man and hearing the mantra that with great power comes great responsibility to don his very own Spirit Halloween spider suit and carry on the torch Peter left to Miles, viewing every action he takes moving forward as what Peter Parker would do. Of course, every one of Peter's loved ones eventually crosses paths with Miles, some either totally against it or others that are somewhat supportive. But it's what Aunt May says to Miles that allows him to become his own version of Spider-Man. Telling Miles to not do what others say, or even what Peter would say to do, but to do what his heart tells him. Do what Miles would do. That Miles officially becomes Spider-Man in his own right in my eyes. It's perfect. It's cinema. It's hands down 5 out of 5 on Letterboxd. But this all gets ruined when Peter just shows up beats up Miles, reunites with his family for like 5 seconds, and then rides off in the sunset with MJ, just dipping on all sense of responsibility and leaving Miles high and dry. Now, you could make the argument that Peter's earned this ending. After all, he died for everything he believed in, but it really cheapens the impact of his death previously. And where you were asking before what it all meant, now it's even more prevalent after the fact. So while I think the previous Ultimate Spider-Man run is a worthy contender to stave off current Amazing Spider-Man trauma, I think if you want something that's more of a modern Spidey juggling adult life and superheroism, then Hickman's Ultimate Spider-Man is where to go. But before I go any further, I have a confession to make. I conducted a little experiment where I read both Zeb Wells' run and Hickman's side by side to study how I felt while reading. For Amazing Spider-Man, I read the first paperback containing issues 1 through 5, and for Ultimate Spider-Man, I did the same with the paperback covering issues 1 through 6. Initially opening Amazing Spider-Man, I was hit with a wave of anger almost instantly with how Peter's life is quite possibly the most depressing it's ever been. But I wanted to make a valiant attempt to read this like a person that hasn't before. So when I started, Peter is shitty to everyone including Aunt May. He's jobless, verging on homelessness, and is running from his debt collector like a disease. Everywhere Peter turns, it's just blatant misery. There isn't a single good thing going for him, and I guess that there are a group of people that appreciate that sort of thing, but when I'm reading about my favorite hero going through this shit, it's fucking depressing. Who wants to be depressed reading fucking Spider-Man, man? Sure, Peter can face hard problems, but I at least want to see him overcome those everyday troubles and dramas that reflect both Peter and Spider-Man. I don't want to read about my favorite hero living in constant misery every issue. If I wanted that, I'd just read The Crow or something. There is also the inclusion of Paul, the kids, and MJ making it pretty clear to Peter that she wants nothing to do with him anymore. And I wish I had something different to say about how I feel about this, but millions of other channels have already expressed the same amount of discomfort I feel in droves. But I will say one thing. For those who think that MJ should be written out of Amazing Spider-Man in order for the comic itself to be good again, you're wrong. It's simply the way that she is written in this run that is drastically different from all the others that makes her character so unlikable anymore. Because when you walk a few feet over to Ultimate Spider-Man, that's the perfect MJ to me. Someone who sticks with Peter through thick and thin. When I read issues featuring this version of MJ where she supports Peter, builds him up, motivates him, I see the MJ that stood by Peter in his worst moments, choosing to stay by his side no matter how much Peter tries to push her away. So when I see how this MJ just essentially discards Peter, it doesn't sit right with me in the slightest. So after that, most of my criticism can be barreled down to a run-of-the-mill, predictable story where Pete is faced against a villain, he's hit with adversity, beats the villain, and saves the day. All around feeling a bit lackluster. And I feel like a bit of an asshole when I say that because I really tried to like the story. I really did, but I just can't. I've read other works by Zeb Wells like Shed or The Death of Sandman. He's a good writer, but I simply don't know what happened here. Anyway, enough of the bullshit. We're here to talk about Ultimate Spider-Man, so let's get on with it already. Immediately, we are introduced to this version of Peter Parker, who says aloud that he is not getting any younger. No doubt a slight jab at Marvel editorial. He's also married to MJ, he's got 2 kids named Richard and May Parker, he's 35, he also has a beard which totally works. Fuck you, ASM. Uncle Ben is alive instead of Aunt May, and he lives a somewhat ordinary life working at the Daily Bugle. He isn't Spider-Man. Not yet. And that's what makes this first issue so brilliant. Spider-Man comics for the longest time have always been rich in storytelling because a lot of them are character-driven. Take Kraven's Last Hunt, for example. In that story, we don't just follow Peter's perspective. We see through the eyes of Kraven, MJ's, and even the friggin' vermin. The story paces itself so we understand what's at stake here. Kraven wants to accomplish his last daring hunt before he dies of cancer and prove he's the ultimate warrior. So he eliminates Spider-Man and dons the mantle of Spider-Man like a trophy. Spider-Man is subsequently buried alive and goes through rigorous hallucinations, beatings, and so on to get back to his wife. MJ is scared for Peter. He hasn't returned home in days and fears that this may finally be the time he'll never come back to her. The point I'm trying to make here is that because the comic spends several issues establishing each character's goals, fears, and thoughts, you're completely invested. Like, will Peter pull through, or will this actually be his end? All because it's 100% character driven. Throughout the first issue of the comic, we get to know these characters and what makes them who they are. Peter is aimless, lost, sleepwalking through life feeling like there's something missing. Uncle Ben is driven by the murder of his wife to uncover the truth that people in the shadows have worked so hard to keep secret. Kingpin is on a quest to show the top 1% of the 1% that he deserves a seat at the table. And Harry Osborn is driven to bring light to those same people in the shadows for murdering his parents. This comic establishes urgency from the get-go masterfully through taking its time to understand these characters. Characters that recognize Peter has, from what they can gather, sleptwalked through life for some time now. I read this this and I took a double meaning from it. Like, yeah, obviously this is a world where he was meant to be Spider-Man, so without that he'd be a bit like the dad from Click. But also meaning that for the last decade or so, Peter has been really stuck in place, unable to change or grow to his full potential without Marvel editorial anchoring him down. So when each character in his life is telling Peter to wake up and force that change to happen, it's almost like Marvel is apologizing to you for the last decade and saying, yeah, this is what could have been, and we're sorry it didn't come sooner. Of course, Peter is bit by the spider through Tony dispatching Hero Catalyst through time, and it's through Uncle Ben, Tony, and ultimately MJ, pun intended, that Peter chooses to become Spider-Man. It's a conclusion to the first issue that always gives me chills, so much that my girlfriend sort of recorded my unfiltered reaction while explaining it to her. Where did this guy go? When I read this, it's like, yeah, that's my fucking hero again. It's like bullshit.
And so why I'm so amped and I can't wait to write about it. Like, because I feel like the way that I'm gonna write about it, a lot of people are gonna connect with it. They're gonna be like, yeah, like it is fucking frustrating, but like there is the silver lining of having like Ultimate. And then just praying that one day, like, the writers and editorial at Marvel are like, yeah, we really fucked up. We should just bring it back. So fucking stupid.
And that's just the first issue alone. We meet characters that have been a part of Spider-Man's history now, somewhat tweaked, like Doc Ock, Gwen Stacy, Matt Murdock. We witness Peter come into his own as Spider-Man, learning to use his powers, learning to fight crime, take on and defeat his first supervillain, and ultimately team up with Harry. Through this, the media sparks all over, asking who these new vigilantes are and what they aim to accomplish, which inspires Uncle Ben and JJ to start their own newspaper, called The Paper, to tell the people of New York the truth and nothing but the truth because it's what the people deserve, publishing everything under the guise of Ben Reilly. It's fucking brilliant. Through Harry and Peter's teamwork, they end up attempting to take on the hulking Harambe-sized Kingpin, only to fail miserably due to still being fairly new at the game. Which all leads to Peter confessing to his family that he is Spider-Man, to which everyone takes the news surprisingly well, as MJ is the one to officially give Peter his codename, with the 6th and final issue ending with them swinging off together. The awesome thing about everything I told you, by the way, is that this all goes on over the course of 6 issues, and there are roughly 6 more already out that manage to take the story even further to new heights. It's astonishing. Every issue feels important, like it's ultimately building up to something incredible, which is leagues better than 8 Deaths of Spider-Man over here. As of today, Peter and Harry are facing off against the Sinister Six, and the friendship between the two of them is heavily strained, feeling like we're almost on track to seeing these two inevitably become rivals, which I really hope doesn't happen, but all the signs are pointing to it. But regardless, read Ultimate Spider-Man over Amazing. It's leagues better, I swear. It treats all of these characters with such love and care that you really just don't get to see anymore. It's good. It's so good, it's good. I just don't read it at all. Over 30 years of rich Spider-Man history being snapped away like nothing, and 10 plus years of 2 steps forward, 500 steps back, I give up, and I choose to make up whatever I feel like about Spider-Man because after all, he is a fictional character. Stories like Spider-Man Life Story, Spider-Girl, Ultimate Spider-Man will always hold a very special place in my heart for how they treat Peter's story. And with how it's going in the main continuity, I've decided to just make up my own ending and encourage others to do the same. Because after reading Sensational Spider-Man's issues 40 and Annual number 1, for me, it's where Peter's story concludes before the events of One More Day. See, in J. Michael Straczynski's run of Amazing Spider-Man, within the relationship between Peter and MJ, by this point, they'd have been married for 30 years in real time. Maybe like 5 to 10 years in comic time. And between MJ's career in Hollywood and Peter's superheroing, there was a significant wedge between the marriage. MJ felt like Peter didn't need or care for her anymore, and vice versa for Peter. They felt like their love had run its course. And so it was looking like it was all coming to an end. Until they both accidentally bumped into each other at an airport, and boom, the famous panel.
I was so afraid he didn't need me anymore.
I do. I love you, MJ. I need you. I'm nothing without you. Come home. Come home to me. Expressing to the love of his life that he is nothing without her, their marriage is then healed over time and things are all hunky-dory again. Except Civil War comes into play. Peter reveals his identity because he feels like it's his responsibility to do so to keep being a hero, only this backfires tremendously. Now the government's after him. All his villains know who he is, and Aunt May is shot instead of Peter by an assassin. Peter dons the black suit, and he stops holding back. He demolishes Kingpin in front of every prisoner so to set an example that if anyone harms his family, he will kill them. Swinging back to the hospital, Aunt May isn't getting any better, and everyone is prepared for what's coming except for Peter. How could he fail Aunt May? There has to be another way. He can save her like he's done so many times before. Only he can't. In his anger and frustration, he beats on a dumpster where God introduces himself to Peter. Eating with God, Peter begs the question that if he is God, this almighty, all-seeing being, what does his Aunt May dying play into the grand scheme of things? So God asks Peter that if he told Peter it were, what would he do? Peter says he'd beg him to save his aunt, offering to give up being Spider-Man, to let God change his life from the moment the spider bit him and bestow all that power and pain onto somebody else. After all, that's within his power, right? God transports Peter to a beach and tells Peter that suffering is one of life's biggest mysteries. It happens for no good reason and can either make a person better or worse. And that despite all the suffering that Peter's gone up against, he's turned that suffering into something good by saving thousands upon thousands of ordinary everyday people. So God leaves Peter with the thought that this may be another person added to the list of Peter's suffering that'll make him an even greater hero. And Peter is transported back to the alley from the very beginning. Now Peter's still on the run with his wife, his aunt's in critical condition with no hope of recovery. And all Peter can think to do now is turn himself in so that at least his family will be safe. So in Sensational Spider-Man Annual number 1, we're presented with both Peter and MJ faced with the reality that they will have to leave one another in order to be better off forever. Or on the other end, they will have to live a miserable life on the run from authorities forever. Neither option is great. Peter believes that it'd be best if he turned himself in, and MJ would rather be taken in than leave her husband. So the comic showcases key moments of the beginnings of their relationship through both perspectives, with neither one of them ever wanting to leave each other's side, with Peter even telling Detective Lemoyne that he always thinks about his wife.
I always think about my wife. Always. My folks died. I was really young, and my folks died. And my aunt and my uncle raised me, right? Those two, May and Ben, they loved me and took care of me and brought me up right. Ending up with them was pretty much the only good thing that happened to me as a kid. And then later there was Mary Jane. Pretty much the only good thing to happen since. So Uncle Ben died. It was bad. It's what gets me out of bed every morning. But knowing that Mary Jane is in that bed waiting, that's the only thing that lets me stop every night.
The whole comic is dedicated to showing why Peter needs MJ just as much as MJ needs Peter. So when Peter saves MJ at the diner from being arrested and they both swing to the very top of the Empire State Building, Peter starts saying that he wants what's best for her even if that means they need to be separated. But no matter what Peter says, MJ denies everything and says that he's her partner and her husband, and that she loves him. This is their life. Him and her forever and always. Now, if you want to ignore the whole Aunt May on her deathbed thing, building to One More Day, I withheld a piece of an ending that just gets shoved under the rug if we just pretend that One More Day never happened. That Peter didn't listen to the devil and accepted things the way they were meant to play out. Peter and MJ at some point in time get their happy ending. They live their lives on the run for a long time until they finally beat it together. They get their home together. They have 2 beautiful children, Benjamin and May Parker. Peter may still be Spider-Man, who knows? But what's important is that they end up together forever and always. And that, my friend, is a happy ending that I can live with. Because if your favorite hero was living a life of constant, unending misery, wouldn't you want to give your hero a happy ending that they deserved? I know I would.
Things have changed for me, and that's okay. I feel the same. I'm on